Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yusrul. It is the 31st of December 2015. The game is World of Warships, and the main item of business for this event is the Arpeggio event that will be kicking off tomorrow. Basics first, for those who haven't been watching the news or missed the small mushroom cloud that appeared over the boards a few weeks back. Wargaming have teamed up with Arc Productions in Japan to do a cross-promotion event between World of Warships and the anime Arpeggio of Blue Steel. Wargaming are presumably hoping to pick up some extra players from the anime crowd, and Arc to get some viewers from the Warships community, especially since the second movie in the franchise, Cadenza, apparently comes out on disc in Japan next year. When's the rest of the world getting it? God knows, I certainly don't. So, what's in it for us players? Well, some new ship skins, a voice pack and a lot of missions, and it's mostly the latter that I'll be discussing today. If you do want to look at the ship skins for Kongu and Myoku, then you need to stop by a channel that has access to a press account. I know that Baron Von Games has done showcase videos for both, and there are probably others floating about. First things first though, Arpeggio mode has to be enabled. It is off by default. If you want to do this, then you don't do it through the options menu. You go to the port selection screen up in the top left hand corner, this little blue icon here. Open that up and select Yokosuka port. If you do not have this port enabled, you will not see any of the Arpeggio aesthetics. I'm not clear as yet whether or not you'll be able to complete the missions outside of that mode, but we shall see. This is simply to ensure that people who really didn't want any anime in their warships didn't have to. It locks out everything. You won't be able to tell if someone else in game is using Arpeggio mode, you'll just see their standard camouflage. Yokosuka itself, well, it's not half bad. It's a modern port, unlike the World War II themed ones that we've had so far, and it's got some nice little animated details in the background, most notably the wind farm, the cranes, and there's some road traffic rumbling around as well. Just not at the moment. Apparently they've all given up and gone home for the night. I can't blame them, it's 20 to 4 in the morning at the moment. The only thing that looks odd to me is that the water is a bit, well, bluer than I expected. It's a better match, more or less, to the water shades, or at least some of them, that they used in the series, but to my eyes, especially once you plonk the existing World of Warships models in, it starts to look just a little bit odd, but I'm being petty there. Next off is the voice pack. Now, this at the moment is the character Iona's only confirmed appearance in the mode. There are rumours circulating, mostly on Reddit, about the possible implementation of the I-401 as a ship, but the I-401 is a submarine, and Wargaming are on the record as saying that subs are pretty much ruled out of World of Warships because of balance and playability problems. So, yeah, probably not. Incidentally, there's a bonus for World of Tanks players here. Iona is voiced by a Japanese actress by the name of Mai Fuchigami, and even if they haven't actually watched Arpeggio, Tankers fans, yep, they might recognise the voice, because one of her other leading characters was Miho Nishizumi from Girls and Panzer. One of those happy little coincidences. Oh yes, and one other thing. If I hear the phrase Kyusoku Senku in this, then I reserve the right to panic. The voice pack also offered a little bit of a teaser in its directory structure. We knew from the articles on the Southeast Asia site that Kongu and Myoku were the first ships obtainable, and the trailers have confirmed two of the other Kongu battleships as well, Kirishima and Haruna. But here, the fourth Kongu class is mentioned in the directories as well, which implies that she'll become available later on. Looking at the way things are structured in that directory, with each voice line subdir containing references to all 6 characters, I have to wonder if we're going to see all the characters providing lines, with Iona acting as the default when we're not using one of the others. So, how do you get access to the skins and the mental models? Well, the World of Warships Southeast Asia site has published the details of the 3-stage missions involved for Kongu and Myoku. The rest will presumably follow as we go through the promotion. Getting Kongu requires you to be playing at least tier 5, while Myoku requires a minimum of tier 6. In practice, of course, you're going to be doing these missions in parallel, so load up tier 6 and above, because that's where the fun is going to be. You've got 2 months from the 1st of January to the 29th of February to get everything done for these first 2 missions. First stages of each are fairly straightforward on the surface, but might get interesting. Destroyer captains, I hope you've done your homework on oxygen torpedoes, because you're going to have hungry wolves coming after you, more so than usual. The first mission in the Miyuku line requires you to get the killing blow on 30 destroyers, and even if people aren't interested in the anime at all, this mission is still going to get some attention because the payout for it consists of 25 Type 1 camouflages, along with 25 Zulu signals, if you hadn't already stocked up over Christmas, and critically, 25 equal speed Charlie London signals. Since that last signal is both fairly desirable if you're still grinding your way up the tree, and is much harder to get than it used to be, it now requires Kraken Unleashed or spending real money, then, as I've said, I expect a lot of people who otherwise couldn't care less about this promotion, or even actively hate it, will grit their teeth and start murdering destroyers, more so than usual. It's not all going to be easy for cruisers either, because Kongu's first stage requires getting the killing blow on 30 cruisers. The payout perhaps isn't quite as good, it's 1 million exchange credits, but at tier 5 or 6 that's still a reasonable little cash injection if you're saving for a new ship, and at any tier it'll pay for a couple of upgrades, or at least half of a stealth upgrade. What'll be interesting to see is if these missions affect player behaviour in the coming weeks. Under normal circumstances, the question of who gets a kill is less relevant than it might be in other games, the only exceptions being if you're chasing Kraken Unleashed, or if you need to pad your KD ratio a bit on the stats. This means that often a battleship player who's just landed a crippling broadside but not quite killed a target isn't too annoyed by having a cruiser or a destroyer snipe the kill during his reload. With these missions though, getting that last blow in suddenly matters quite a bit more, so I wonder if we're going to see battleships switching from broadsides to chain fire, and people suddenly getting just a bit salty about someone else shooting at that juicy destroyer on 1000 health when they were busy reloading. Once you've done those missions, you're on to Phase 2, and if I had to make a prediction here, it's that the Cleveland is about to have something of a comeback along with carriers in general. Phase 2 for Kongu requires you to destroy 150 aircraft, and doing that in a reasonable time frame means either a decent anti-airship, which typically means tier 6 or above cruisers with defensive fire, and the Cleveland's the most easily obtainable of those, or it means pulling out the aircraft carriers and loading up for air superiority, so typically that will be the Mod 3 flight control system to get the extra fighter squadron into the air. Once you've got your 150 kills, you get 5,000 free XP, and the Kongu mission advances on to the final phase. Meanwhile, players chasing Miyuku will be indulging their pyromania tendencies, because for stage 2 of the Miyuku, you need to start 300 fires. Yes, I said 300. No, I didn't misplace a decimal point. This is where the Cleveland comes into its own, because bar none, as far as I can tell, this ship is the best fire starter in the game. It has 12 guns and can put out up to 100 rounds per minute with basic firing training, and each of those guns has got a 12% baseline chance of starting a fire against another target. There's also a captain's skill, which is going to be worth getting for this, and that's Demolition Expert, which takes it up to a 15% chance. That plus 3%, yeah, it's additive. I believe all the other skills affecting fire starting are multiplicative. The Cleveland's other advantage, of course, is that it's tier 6, so its matchmaking is tier 4 to tier 8. Remember that ships have a multiplier that's hidden as to how likely they are to be set on fire. It starts at 1.0 at tier 1, goes down to 0.5 at tier 10, assuming my information's up to date. So around about tier 6, it's hovering about the 0.75 mark. Why does that benefit the Cleveland? Because the only ships that even come close to the combination of rate and weight required to match that kind of fire potential are tier 10s as a broad rule. You're looking at the Gearing Destroyer, 133 rounds per minute with basic fire training, and an 8% chance of starting a fire if you've got Demolition Expert, but because it's tier 10 and its matchmaking is higher, it's got a much lower chance of starting a fire. The Gearing's only advantage over the Cleveland is that it can, I believe, with the right upgrades, fire its guns without breaking stealth, whereas a Cleveland has to get detected just to get into firing range. And, well, Clevelands are Clevelands. For some reason, people tend to prioritise them. Your other options are the Russian destroyers, particularly the Ognyevoy and the Khabarovsk. And my apologies if I've just mangled the names of those, I suspect I have. Ognyevoy, in particular, is the tier 6 Russian destroyer, and its guns are the same as the tier 7 and 8, the Kiev and the Tashkent. However, again, tier 6, it does have the better multipliers because of its matchmaking from 4 to 8. Guns themselves put out up to 80 rounds a minute with basic firing training, and the 130mm shells they use have a 7% chance of a fire, going up to 10% with Demolition Expert. So you're probably looking at around about 6 fires per minute. Of course, the Cleveland's putting out far more. Against that, again, the Ognyevoy is a destroyer, so it can actually get into a firing position without breaking its stealth. Of course, once it does open fire, it's going to start getting rounds coming back at it quite rapidly. I don't think, unlike the Gearing, this thing has got the option of stealthing its guns. Aside from that, you're looking at the tier 10 Russian destroyer, the Khabarovsk. Now, this gets away with it mostly because it ups its gun complement to 8 guns and improves its rate of fire up to around about 14.5 rounds per minute per gun. So you're getting about 115 rounds per minute. Fire chance is better than the Gearing, 7% base, 10% with demolition, but its stealth characteristics are much worse than the Gearing, 10 kilometers as opposed to the 7 point something that the Gearing enjoys. So I don't believe a Khabarovsk can fire its guns from stealth. On the other hand, it does have the option to set slightly more fires than the Gearing. It's pretty marginal though. The fact that we're having to look this high up the tier for ships that can match a Cleveland for fire starting makes me think that most people are just going to break out the Cleveland and have done with it. Once you're done burning down the house, and probably everything else on top, Phase 2 of the Miyoko has some pretty juicy rewards as well. It starts with 25 Type 2 camouflage, which isn't too shabby at all, then goes on to 25 Sierra Mike signals and 25 India Delta signals, so ironically enough, the battleships are going to be very happy with your little fire starting spree. Is that quite as juicy as the Equal Speed Charlie Londons? Not really, but Sierra Mike's an awkward one to get hold of since it requires the double strike achievement. And, well, those are fairly rare. So, again, the opportunity to pick up a few quick signals on the fly, yep, I can imagine people who don't otherwise have an interest in Arpeggio or anime in general going for these missions. The good news is that the final phase of both ships is the same, and it's nothing like the slog that the other phases might turn out to be. All you have to do is inflict 1 million damage over any number of games, and even for a distinctly average player like me, that's basically 30 to 35 odd decent games with no special conditions. And if you're in higher tiers or you've mastered the ninja art of shooting straight, you'll probably get them done in, well, if you're averaging 50,000 damage, then you're looking at 20 games. If you're averaging 40,000 damage, it's 25 games, and so on and so forth. And with a bit of luck, you'll be able to do both Phase 3 missions in parallel and double count your damage. Once that's done, you'll be given the respective ships, either a fully researched Kongu or Miyoko class, albeit with no option to downgrade the modules. the appropriate mental model to act as captain, and as the cherry on top, you also get given the Fire Control Mod 1 upgrade to improve your main battery accuracy. And then you can sit back and enjoy a pleasant cup of tea. Here's the thing though, I have to wonder if the list of ships that I'm reasonably sure are going to be appearing is a complete one. Let's break it down for a second. We've got Iona, who probably won't appear beyond her voice role, purely because of the difficulties of making a submarine work in this game. Then you've got the 4 Kongu sisters, Kongu, Kirishima, Haruna and Hiei, with Miyoko rounding out the initial known lineup. In other words, as far as rewards go, we're looking at 4 Kongus and a Miyoko. That, to me at least, seems a bit lopsided, and right now this is where this video is going to head straight off into speculation, because I've got no option or evidence for any of the following. So, Crazy Hyuga is probably not going to appear, mostly because the Ise class is not in-game. The class themselves started out as heavy tweaked versions of the Fusu, but by the time construction was done, they'd made so many changes to the design that the Japanese Navy considered them to be different ships, and that's before you get into the remodelling as aviation battleships that both Ise and Hyuga received after Midway. Wargaming could go for the Fusu as a near enough match to the Hyuga, or they could suddenly stick the Ise into the game from nowhere, but unless one of those happens, we're unlikely to see Crazy Hyuga, probably much to the relief of Iona fans the world over. Possibilities from the Cadenza film? Well, you've got Ashigara and Nachi, but they're both Miyoko class cruisers, so you'd still have the issue with variety. There's also the Yamato class battleship, which appears in Cadenza. On the one hand, yay, as maybe an ultimate reward, but on the other hand, I'm having trouble seeing Wargaming giving away a top-tier battleship, and arguably the most powerful battleship in the game, as a mission reward, even if it's for a long mission chain. Yes, they've done stuff like that in World of Tanks, the Object 260 comes to mind, but Yamato, like I said, that's the most powerful single ship in the game, arguably. I just have a hard time seeing Wargaming giving it away. We can probably rule out appearances from the manga-only characters as well, as fun as they'd be, since they don't have voice actresses in place. So, as far as these things go, the Zikaku, which is sister ship to the Shokaku, is highly unlikely to appear. Ditto the Kaguru-class Yukikaze, as well as the Lexington and the Nagato. All those ships have appeared in the manga, they just haven't appeared in the anime. So, no voice actress and therefore no lines, or at least a bit too much effort to get them into the game. The characters who are most conspicuously absent, however, are Maya and Takao. Takao in particular, since the Sundaya Heavy Cruiser turned into something of a breakout character and features so heavily in the marketing that you'd be forgiven for thinking that she, not Iona, was the main ship character. Maya is somewhat less well known, although she's an entertaining goofball, right up to one of the few moments in any media where I've felt sympathy for the antagonist. The ship they use in the game is the key problem behind all this, because both Maya and Takao are Atago class cruisers, and the Atago of class is the premium Japanese tier 8 cruiser. And if Wargaming start giving this ship away, even as the result of a long mission chain or as a gotta catch 'em all reward, well, the screaming on the boards would probably make the initial controversy seem like a little playground squabble, and I can kind of understand why. I can imagine people feeling hard done by if they'd paid for the Atago, and then a few weeks or months later Wargaming give it away as a mission reward, no matter how hard the mission itself turned out to be. In turn, Wargaming could be forgiven for reasoning that it's much easier to just not put Takao and Maya into the game, even if it means passing up on that bit of character recognition. Probably the only way we'll see either of those characters is if Wargaming either decide full ahead and damn the controversy, or else do a version of the Atago with all the premium bonuses stripped out. same ship, but lose the premium matchmaking, the credit bonuses, the XP, etc, etc, etc. And even then, there'll probably still be a minor riot from people who see free Arpeggio and don't read the fine print. So, with 24 hours more or less to go, I'll admit to being quietly enthusiastic about this promotion. The skins and the voice pack, possibly voice packs plural, should be a bit of fun and spice things up. It'll be interesting to mix my playstyle up a bit to adapt to the missions, and the chance to pick up a Miyoko will, on a purely personal level, be welcome since I've been slacking on my Japanese cruisers. Despite pulling a Kraken in it, I've never quite gotten the feel of the Furutaka. As for the anime itself, Arpeggio is actually worth a look if you've not seen it. It's decently written, it's got some good battles, there are some funny moments and a few tearjerkers. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the few series that has left me feeling sorry for the antagonist in places. There is some fan service, more so than Girls and Panzer, but it's mostly ignorable, and it's much less present than Kankol or Strike Witches, for example. The doubts I've got about this promotion centre around the lineup of ships. 4 Kongus as rewards feel like they might get a bit samey, and it's got the feel of a missed opportunity to it if that's all that they're going to put out, along with, of course, Miyuku. Given that this crossover has been in the works for over a year, it was first announced at the Tokyo Game Show of 2014. On the other hand, the promotion's running for at least 2 months and probably longer, so we'll probably get other announcements and other ships later on. We'll just have to wait and see, especially with regards to the missions for Haruno and Kirishima. For the moment though, Kongu and Miyoku's missions are the main event. The Southeast Asia website is giving a start time of just after 1300 local, and I assume that the other servers will follow much the same pattern of lunchtime launches. So once everyone's sobered up from Hogmanay, I'll see you in game where, starting tomorrow, it's a carnival. Farewell.